Yes, Your Honor. Let's now go through some of the areas that Mr. Delarianda talked about. Starting with, and again, I'm going to give a blanket apology for using some curse words, but when they exist in the case, they exist in the courtroom. So Mr. Delarianda was wondering whether or not you would use the term assholes in inviting somebody over for dinner. I think he said probably not. However, would you agree that if you were talking to somebody about something that you've used the words assholes probably thousands of times in your life?
I have used it.
Okay.
Yes.
And sometimes it's just used as just a slang term. Would you agree?
Yes, sir.
When Mr. Delarianda said those words to you, I think he said assholes, didn't he?
In that tone?
Yeah.
Approximately. Yeah.
Did you hear my client say that word assholes on the tape? We can play it again.
I heard him say it.
Okay. He didn't say it with the screeching voice that Mr. Delarianda did he?
No, sir.
He just sort of said assholes, right?
Yes, sir.
Did that, the way he said it, not the way Mr. Delarianda just said it, let's put that aside for a minute and speak more importantly about the way my client said the word assholes. Did that give you any cause for concern as to the way he said it?
No, sir.
Didn't show any ill will or hatred or spite when he said these assholes always get away? Did it?
If I may, not towards the individual. It seemed like more of a generalization.
Sure. Right. And of course he was generalizing a little bit, correct? Because you know from your investigation that he was a bit frustrated that his neighborhood was being assailed by burglars, right?
That's how I interpret
You
it.
knew that.
Yes.
You knew that. As a matter of fact, you investigated and found out that a person, Emmanuel Burgess, was arrested 2 weeks before this event, a young black male, for having burglarized several homes in the neighborhood, right?
Yes, sir.
Late teens, tall, thin, just been arrested, right?
Yes, sir.
Sentenced to 5 years in prison for having burglarized a bunch of homes both in Retreat View Circle and outside, but still in your jurisdiction, right?
I wasn't involved in that, but yes, sir.
But you found that out, and looking into everything that you were looking into to see what's going on in the neighborhood, you knew not only had Emmanuel Burgess been arrested 2 weeks before for burglarizing, but that there were a lot of other burglaries in that same neighborhood, right?
Yes, sir.
Were you concerned that he was concerned about that? Did that cause you any concern that somebody who involved themselves in protecting the community, being on neighborhood watch, would be concerned about a bunch of burglaries in the neighborhood?
Him being concerned, if I may, is one thing. As far as my personal feelings towards his actions the night of is a little bit different.
Sure, and we'll get to that in just a moment.
Okay.
But talking specifically to the issue of calling them these assholes always get away, were you concerned that he used the word assholes?
No, sir.
And you've used it yourself?
Yes, I have.
And not in a necessarily derogatory way, correct? Just as sort of a slang term?
It tends to be more towards derogatory, sir.
So ever for guys walk into the squad room, it's about dinner time, you go, okay, what are you assholes doing for dinner? Anything like that?
Personally, no.
Really?
Not that. I see what you're saying, but it could be viewed that way.
Okay. Just like when he used the word shit, right? Oh shit, he's running.
Yes, sir.
Any concern with that slang term?
No.
Don't suggest that that evidences any hatred or ill will on his behalf, do you?
As I interpret that, that was said with the infliction as a sense of urgency.
Yeah.
As if something was happening bad.
Right, because he was just running away, correct?
Yes.
And then let's talk about fucking punks. Were you here for John Guy's opening? Did you hear it?
No, sir.
Oh. When Mr. Zimmerman said the words fucking punks, did he say it in a screeching, loud, aggressive voice the way Mr. Delarianda just recounted it to you?
No, sir.
Do you know why Mr. Delarianda yelled it at you?
To stress a point, to emphasize.
Right. But you heard it on tape, correct?
Yes, sir.
And how is it said on tape?
It's said as more as a matter of factly, as far as These assholes always get away. Or fucking punks. Yeah.
Right. Might show some frustration, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Frustration based upon the fact that other people in the neighborhood who have burglarized the place seem to get away on occasion, right?
Yes.
And in that sense, you said that there was no evidence that Trayvon Martin was doing anything wrong, correct?
None whatsoever.
You don't know that, though, correct?
No, I do not.
Right? You know that whatever he may have been planning to do just wasn't completed, correct?
I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know. There was no evidence to suggest that at all.
Matter of fact, there was a type of a tool found in the area where Trayvon Martin may have been hiding, wasn't there?
Approximately 5-6 days after the investigation of the scene, yes.
When you went back and you looked in the bushes and you found, what was it?
It was a piece of an awning belonging to, I believe it was a piece of a window, piece of hardware basically. It looked like a Slim Jim.
Slim Jim. And what's a Slim Jim?
Slim Jim is a device used to go ahead and jimmy locks on vehicles primarily.
To break into a vehicle.
Yes, sir.
And that was found a few days after this event.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Not particularly tied to this event by you, but it was there, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
In the bushes just off of one of the residences, correct?
In the bushes behind Jonathan Manolo's residence.
Okay. So, would you suggest that the focus be on how Mr. Zimmerman stated the words fucking punks as opposed to the way Mr. Guy did in opening or Mr. Delarianda just did in your questioning?
Well, I can't speak for Mr. Guys, but Mr. Delarianda, it was different.
Okay. Now, he also asked you that you were questioning Mr. Zimmerman on the fact that he was following Trayvon Martin, correct?
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Zimmerman said?
Words along.
He said yes, right? He said, wait a minute, were you following him? And in the interview, his word was yes, right?
In one of the interviews,
yes. He acknowledged to you that he was following him at one point, correct?
Yes, sir.
Anything wrong with following somebody like that? Let me ask you this way, anything illegal?
Objection, I've asked that in the
I'm sorry. I'll let him answer that one.
Repeat it, please.
Anything, did you think that there was anything wrong with him following him to see where he was going?
Legally speaking, no.
Okay. Matter of fact, it was, and you heard the non-emergency call, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And it was twice on that the non-emergency operator asked Mrs. Zimmerman, tell me if he does anything else.
Yes, I believe that was said.
Right?
Yes.
Does that indicate that he wants him to keep an eye on him?
Yes, sir.
And you said following him is not legally improper, correct?
It's not illegal. No,
Even
sir.
approaching somebody is not legally improper, is it?
That's open for interpretation.
Tell me what crime you believe would occur if I were to walk up to you on the street and say, hi.
In that manner, none whatsoever.
How about, what are you doing here?
None whatsoever.
How about, get the hell out of here?
None whatsoever.
How about, I don't like the way you're dressed. I don't like the fact that you have gray on. Get out of my face.
That could be construed as confrontational.
Sure, but is that
Not illegal.
crime?
No, sir.
And when this operator who said twice, tell me if he does anything else, then says, are you following him? What does Mrs. Zimmerman say?
He says yes.
And in your investigation, is there anything at all to suggest at that time that Mrs. Zimmerman continued to follow Mr. Martin?
At which point, sir?
At the point that the officer said, or the non-emergency operator said, we don't need you to do that, and Mrs. Zimmerman said, okay.
I would say yes, there was.
And what evidence would you have?
His end location.
Sorry?
His end location, the location where the incident ultimately ended.
Okay. So the fact that, may I approach the witness, Your Honor? For the occasion purposes, the witness stated here at 139. Because you know the event started where?
The event, as far as I'm concerned, started off that map.
Okay. Talking about the physical altercation, I apologize. My understanding from, well, what's your understanding as to when Mr. Zimmerman got to this area, what path he took?
Nice man.
Please do.
Could you face forward with
Yes. Okay. My understanding of the interpretation is he's coming this way. He walks. Actually, I got a pointer. Okay. He walks, per his statement, all the way over here. He says he doesn't see him. He says he doesn't see him. Okay. And the altercation, physical altercation, started right there, approximately.
Okay. Great. Thank you. So, with that as context, then, do you know exactly where Mr. Zimmerman was when the non-emergency operator said, we don't need you to do that?
Based on his statement, he was at his vehicle, which would have been, I believe, off of that or wherever he parked it.
Yeah, based on his statement, he was at his vehicle, which would have been, I believe,
Wherever he parked it on Twin Trees.
It's your understanding of the investigation that Mrs. Zimmerman was at his vehicle when the officer said, we don't need you to do that?
That was when he was exiting his vehicle. That's my
Okay.
understanding, yeah.
Okay, and then how many seconds went forward as he was walking before that conversation occurred?
Objection.
I'd have
Those
to,
facts, not an evidence, case of walking.
sustained.
How many seconds? You heard the tape where you can hear him getting out of the car, correct?
well, I heard the sound of the door being opened, which I interpreted that.
That he got out of the car,
Yes.
right? And then you know that he was walking in some direction because he said to the officer in response to, are you following him? He said yes, right?
Objection is the facts, not an evidence, walking, assuming a fact, not an evidence.
Rephrase your question.
You know that he was following him because he told the non-emergency operator that he was, right?
Yes, sir.
And you know from the conversation that Mrs. Zimmerman indicated to the non-emergency operator that he had cut between the buildings, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so, if I might approach again, so just so we're clear with what you just testified to, he parked his car somewhere in this area, correct?
Correct.
And then, go ahead,
Back around here somewhere.
right?
So he's, I'd have to hear it again, obviously.
Could
but
you face forward?
Yeah, I'd have to hear it again, obviously, but somewhere very shortly thereafter leaving his car, that's when it was asked, are you following him?
Okay.
And he said yes.
And Mrs. Zimmerman had indicated that Mr. Martin had gone between the buildings. He was out of sight, correct?
Yes.
Yet, you testified a moment ago that pursuant to Mr. Zimmerman's statement, he had gone down to Retreat View Circle, correct?
Well, that was his statement, but as far as him having a visual on when he might have got out of the vehicle, I really don't know. I can't say. It wasn't there. But he could have seen him at any point which way he was running. Am I making myself clear? I mean,
Well, the jury can decide that. I'll try and walk
Okay.
you through a little bit
Yeah.
more. So my question a little while ago was whether or not you had any evidence to support any contention that Mr. Zimmerman continued to follow Trayvon Martin after being told not to. Do you have any evidence to support that?
I would answer, I have information, yes, that there was, just based on where we located Trayvon and the fact that the altercation happened after his conversation. That's my interpretation.
Let me
that
ask it this
there was
way.
some
Let me ask it
problem.
this way. Do you have anything to contradict Mrs. Zimmerman's statement that he walked the rest of the way to Retreat View Circle and was coming back towards his car when the interaction, whatever it was, between Trayvon Martin and him occurred?
Nothing tangible, no.
Go intangible on us then. So what do you mean nothing tangible? What do you have, if anything?
And the circumstances, the totality of the whole thing that I'm looking at, as I interpreted it, when he says follow, walking behind, trying to find a direction, I construe that as follow. He was trying to do something in the same direction where Trayvon was going.
He was trying to see where he was.
As far as the word follow, as my report may indicate, I mean, it's, but it's open for interpretation.
And as your report indicates, there's nothing to suggest that Trayvon Martin went straight down Retreat View Circle, towards Retreat View Circle. He went between the buildings, correct?
According to statements made by Mr. Zimmerman. According to statements by your client, yeah.
And of course, all of those statements, including Mr. Zimmerman saying that he was attacked by Trayvon Martin coming from that area as well, correct?
Correct.
Anything to contradict that?
No, sir.
You understood from your conversation with Wendy Dorval, your knowledge of Neighborhood Watch, that if a crime is occurring, that you ought to call 911, correct?
I don't recall talking to Wendy Dorval about it, but I may have. But yes, that's what you do.
So if it's just a concern, like a suspicious person, you dial non-emergency, correct?
Yes, sir.
And if it's an actual crime occurring, you dial 911.
If those are the instructions, yes.
And which one did Mrs. Zimmerman dial?
The non-emergency.
Evidencing, would you agree that he was not concerned that a crime was actually occurring, just that he was concerned about somebody being where they may not supposed to be?
Yes, sir.
And in your experience and knowledge, did you think it was inappropriate for Mrs. Zimmerman to call non-emergency when he saw Trayvon Martin hanging out between two homes in the rain, in the dark?
Objection, as he calls for speculation on his part.
Sustained.
You want to ask him for
Rephrase
his,
your
okay. In your opinion, I don't want you to speculate as to what, but in your opinion, was that an appropriate, from law enforcement experience, was that an appropriate occurrence for him to contact non-emergency based upon seeing somebody who he didn't know at night in the rain between two homes, not walking away, just standing there?
My objection is to assume that those facts are accurate and truthful.
The jury,
Okay, you can answer the question.
That would be reasonable to
Reasonable,
call
correct?
non-emergency.
no, in fact, if you were driving an unmarked car past that at that precise moment and saw Trayvon Martin there, standing between two buildings at night in the rain, not moving, maybe even looking into a window, would you have stopped and talked to him?
Not just based on his presence. No, I would not.
And why not?
He might live there.
But the question is, would you stop and ask him?
Not just based on what you observed, no.
Do you agree that police, at least, are supposed to look into situations that might be suspicious?
If brought to the attention by a citizen, yes.
I'm sorry?
If brought to the attention by a citizen, such as George Zimmerman, yes, we are obligated to.
So you wouldn't do it on your own?
If on routine patrol, I can't say, maybe.
Mr. De La Rionda asked you that if you had found out whether or not Trayvon Martin was armed, correct?
Yes, sir.
Do you also realize from the investigation, presuming for a moment that Mrs. Zimmerman's story is completely accurate, and that he did in fact receive the injuries to the back of his head at Trayvon Martin's hands, that Trayvon Martin was smashing his head, hitting his head against concrete, correct?
Yes, sir.
Do you consider that to have armed himself with the concrete?
Yes, sir.
So, though he may not have been armed when he was walking, he certainly armed himself with something that could cause great bodily injury or death by hitting the head against concrete, correct?
Yes, sir.
And in the challenge interview, we go back and forth as to whether or not it was an interview with challenge, an interview for information, but again, for these purposes, calling it a challenge interview. Mrs. Zimmerman stated to you that his concern was that there were people who are out there, quote, victimizing the neighborhood, right?
Yes, that's what he said, yes.
And do you believe that his basis for that thought or even that feeling was well-founded? Let me ask it this way. How many burglaries had occurred in that neighborhood in the past 4 or 5 months?
I don't have the exact numbers, sir.
Would you consider it to be a rash of burglaries?
It would depend how many we're talking about. I don't know.
Well, limiting to the extent of what you looked into. I know you looked into Emmanuel Burgess, and he was arrested a couple of weeks before. And
Yes,
there were
sir.
other burglaries that you were aware of, correct, within the last few months before this event?
I'd have to refresh my memory as far as the number, as to consider it a rash of burglaries. To consider it a rash of burglaries or a crime spree, but I guess in his mind, yes.
And of course, burglaries are what occur when the people are not at home, correct?
Repeat, please.
A burglary that we're talking about now are those where the people are not at home when the crime occurs, correct?
Correct.
It's called burglary of an occupied dwelling or a home invasion when somebody's home, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that happened here as well, didn't it?
Yes, sir.
A woman, and you were aware in your investigation that a woman and her, I think, 4-month-old child had to hide in a bedroom closet while 2 guys downstairs took out her TV, laptop, and other items.
Yes,
And that
sir.
was only weeks before February 26th of 2012, correct?
Yes, sir.
And it may have been months before, a couple of months before,
Yes.
if I said weeks.
It had occurred, though.
Concerning the videotaping, and I can put you back to the tape, my memory, and tell me if I'm wrong, was that when you were bluffing Mr. Zimmerman about the idea that Trayvon Martin may have had a phone that was videotaping things, you certainly did it in as believable a way as you could, remember?
Yes, sir.
You know how to get it across to him, correct?
Yes,
He
sir.
seemed smug, as though he already had made this decision. Well, you can try and bluff me if you want, but I know he didn't have his phone out. Was there any of that came across to you?
No, sir.
In this challenge interview, was that exactly what you were looking for to see?
Partially, yes.
And none of that came across to you, did it?
None at all. No.
Matter of fact, he seemed quite interested in the fact that there may have been a videotape, correct?
Yes, he did.
Didn't he also say that he, maybe without his knowing, he'd hoped that the Homeless Association had put up another video camera somewhere in that back area?
Yes, he did.
So he actually said to you, not only do I hope that Trayvon Martin was somehow taping this, or since he had the phone out or whatever, that somehow maybe it was on video. And he said, what was his words? Thank God, I hope he was videotaping it.
Words to those effect, yes.
And he even said to you, well, maybe it's being videotaped from somewhere else. That maybe Homeowners Association had put up a camera going right down that dog walk that I wasn't aware of, or for that matter, any one of the dozen neighbors may have had a video camera out, correct?
Yes, sir.
Didn't he also indicate that he even hoped that maybe the one person who had come out, who we now know to be John Good, that maybe he had videotaped it?
I don't know if he verbalized that, but he seemed to be very open to having something videoed. Yes. He seemed to be very elated in the prospect that there was some sort of videotape.
Hoping that that would actually document what happened that night.
Yes, sir.
Another challenge that you did, just a moment for my own, another. At least I didn't do a complete pirouette. And I said, excuse me first. Thank you. Another challenge that you did to Mr. Zimmerman was concerning this question about the hands over the face, correct? Because
Yes,
that was
sir.
a concern of yours, right?
Yes, sir.
He had said he placed his hand over my face at one point. I really thought he was suffocating me. Words like that, correct?
Yes, sir.
And yet, on the screaming on the 911, there wasn't a great deal of muffling. Would you agree?
No, sir, there was not, yes.
And had there been muffling, then it would have even been perfectly coordinated with what Mrs. Zimmerman told you, because then the suffocating, muffling would have shown up on the tape. But in this case, it didn't, correct?
Correct.
You would agree that the screams are from one person, correct?
Based on interpreted, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that they were just that, screams, stop, scream, stop, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I think you said that you also believe Mr. Zimmerman may have exaggerated as to the number of times getting hit, correct?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Delariano brought that up again as an exaggeration, right?
Possible, yes.
Yeah, I think we talked about it as to how it might be perceived when you're the one getting hit, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. May also be that you perceive getting smothered even when somebody has your hand on their broken nose.
Possibly, yes.
Okay. May have actually had a hand on his mouth or nose, but just not enough to interfere with Mr. Zimmerman's continued screams for help, correct?
Correct.
So even though you challenged him on that to try and come up with an answer, and he told you, I don't know, right?
Correct.
Did he change his story at that point, realizing that now you got him on a fact, and just say, well, actually I turned over and I was screaming the other way, and that's what? Did he do any of that?
No, sir, did not.
He just basically said, I think he had his hands on my head, right?
Yes, sir.
I think he was trying to stop me from
Yes, sir.
breathing, and it hurt.
Yes, sir.
And just so we're clear in that regard, would you agree that there may have been some screams muffled enough so that they simply didn't show up on the tape?
There could have been, possibly.
With that last challenge, this, call it the suffocation challenge, was there anything in that challenge of Mrs. Zimmerman that you thought then was problematic? The way he answered it?
No, sir.
Now let's talk about the video where Mr. Zimmerman seems, maybe for the second time, to not notice Miss Lauer's number on the right-hand side, correct?
Yes, sir.
And as he's walking you through it, again, voluntarily doing what you wanted him to do, right?
Yes, sir.
He sort of looked over and he said, I didn't see anything here.
Yes, sir.
Would he have seen them if he had just started walking by and just got past Miss Lauer's, you know, the front door right there? Is there any number on the side of that building?
No, sir.
Okay. So if I might carefully approach your arm again. Just so we're clear on, again, States 139. This is Miss Lauer's, and front door here, number is sort of on this side.
Yes, sir. Facing the street.
Right, facing out this way.
Yes, sir.
So if Mr. Zimmerman had gotten to this point or was looking around, doing whatever he was doing, as soon as he got to somewhere in this point, he would not have a line of sight to
I'm
those.
going to object to misstating what Mr. Zimmerman said on video as to where he was when he didn't or did see the address.
Okay.
I'll clear that up.
Rephrase your question.
No one could see the numbers once you get past this, correct?
Correct.
And you do agree that Mrs. Zimmerman was trying to do the best he could to acknowledge what he was doing in the recreation, correct?
By appearances, yes.
He seemed to be doing everything that he could to explain to you what he was doing.
Yes, sir.
As he was doing this, was it a situation where you just sort of letting him run with it, or were you asking him any questions along the way?
I believe some questions were asked for
Yeah.
clarification.
Sure. And when he said, as he's walking with Miss Lowers to the right of him, and he's sort of looking this way, the car is somewhere near where he said he parked his, right?
From what I recall, yes.
And you had the non-emergency call already known by the time you did the recreation, so you knew an idea of the series of events, correct?
Yes, sir.
You knew that he had said that I'd gotten out of the car about here, right?
Yes, sir.
And that he was walking down that road, or doing something, walking, running, jogging, whatever he was doing. He was ambulating down that pathway, correct?
Yes, sir.
That he sort of looked over and said, I couldn't see any numbers. And he looked to his left, correct?
From what I recall, yes.
Yeah, did anyone ever think at that point to go, excuse me, if you back up and look over this way, there's a number. Why didn't you look at that number?
If it wasn't mentioned, no.
Did you ever do that afterwards?
No.
Did that seem, in the context of what he was trying to explain that happened to him that night, that ended up with what it ended up with, that that was some type of active deception to you?
I didn't interpret it as such, no.
Okay. I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense in your mind that he couldn't remember the name of the street, correct?
Correct.
If you said there's only 3 there, correct?
Correct.
Did you, and you even questioned him about that, right?
Yes, sir.
But did that show to you to be some active deception on his part?
The fact that he couldn't remember the 3 streets could have possibly, yes, it did raise flags and concerns.
Okay. And did that lead to any concern? I mean, you addressed it in this confrontation interview, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you okay with what he responded?
That's all I could do is be okay with it. And that's...
Okay. And then you were questioned about a number of things concerning the investigation. So I want to talk to you about some of those.
Okay.
The medical examiner's report. You had a chance to review that, correct?
Yes, I have.
Okay. And the medical examiner's report and its findings were consistent with Mrs. Zimmerman's story, were they not?
Yes, sir.
Okay. As far as how he shot him, correct? Where he shot him?
Yes, sir.
And the distance between the muzzle of the gun and the clothing, correct?
Yes, sir.
And also that there was a gap of a few inches between the clothing and Mr. Martin's chest, correct?
Yes, sir.
Evidencing that though the muzzle of the gun was up against the chest, up against the shirt, that the shirt was not up against the chest, that there was a few inch difference,
Yes, sir.
right? And didn't that support the contention that Mr. Martin was hanging over Mr. Zimmerman, his shirt coming forward when the shot was fired?
It did.
Right?
Yes.
Because had he been standing up, as I am now, the shirt would be up against the chest, probably, right?
Probably, yes,
And
sir.
if I lean over, my shirt is going to fall apart from my chest a few inches, and that seems to be how it was, correct?
Yes, sir.
The medical examiner's report, however, does not support a contention, an allegation, that Mr. Zimmerman pressed that gun against Trayvon Martin's chest before he fired it, does it?
Not from the one I
Matter
heard.
of fact, the known evidence completely contradicts that type of a suggestion, doesn't it?
From what I understand, yes.
So no pressing of the gun against the chest, was there?
Not based on evidence that I've read, no.
And you saw the 7-Eleven video since, right? Though I think Mr. Delaronda suggested you didn't have it then. You've certainly seen it since.
I don't think I viewed the video itself. I think that was bought after I was,
No, but have you seen it?
I've seen stills,
Okay.
still photos.
And these stills that you saw showed Trayvon Martin in it
Yes, sir.
and show him the way he appeared that night?
Yes, sir.
So when you say that certainly in the autopsy photograph that you wanted to show Mr. Zimmerman, which again was part of the challenge interview, correct?
Yes, sir.
You hit him with something sort of emotional and to ground him that he had caused the death of this person?
It was graphic, yes, sir.
And that's the purpose of it, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. But the picture of Mr. Martin at 7-Eleven, would you agree that that shows somebody at his height, whatever that might have been, in the shoes and the hoodie, and wearing the outfit that he was wearing, that he did not look in the 7-Eleven video to be the skinny kid that you showed the picture of to Mrs. Zimmerman, correct?
Correct.
Much larger looking individual?
I would agree with you, yes.
Okay. My height or so? I'm
Correct.
6'2", right?
Yes.
If I was wearing a hoodie and had his shoes on, correct?
Yes.
So when you talk about relative size, although I think you said that Mrs. Zimmerman, not today, but back then, wouldn't come across as a skinny kid, correct?
Correct.
When you look at the actual height differential, there was quite a height differential, wasn't there?
Yes, there was.
And therefore a reach differential?
Yes, sir.
You know what that means, right?
Yes, I do.
What is that?
The reach is measured arm to arm, sideways.
Come and have a moment, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Let's start at the very end. Would you agree that after somebody dies, they don't get taller?
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Have you ever heard of when people die that they get taller?
Oh, no, sir.
So you're not disputing if the medical examiner were to say they measured him on a table that Trayvon Martin was only 5'11". You're not disputing that, are you?
No, sir.
I mean, you're not trying to tell the jury that after Trayvon Martin died, he grew to be 6'2",
No,
are
sir.
you?
No.
I mean, have you ever heard of that? Somebody dying and growing taller?
No, sir.
Okay. And by the way, Mr. O'Mara asked you, I want to make sure I understood your answer. Are you saying that in Seminole County, it's against the law for somebody to wear a hoodie at night?
Objection, Your Honor. That is a mischaracterization of the evidence in my question.
Okay, I think you need to rephrase it because you started.
Are you saying that it's against the law for a person to wear a hoodie at night?
No, sir. No, sir, I'm not.
I believe in your investigation and your interview with the defendant that he had a phone, correct, that night?
The
When
defendant?
when he observed the victim, Trayvon Martin? The defendant had a cell phone,
Yes, he
right?
did, yes.
You didn't find any evidence that the defendant, when he's claiming he's seen the suspicious activity, videotaped or photographed the suspicious activity that he claims the victim was doing.
The object, Your
Was there
Honor.
any evidence of that?
Just a second, what's the objection?
Outside the scope of recross, unless we're opening up that new area.
No, overall, that's not opening it up.
You were asked about videos, right? Was there any evidence to indicate that when the defendant claimed that the victim was committing a crime or was about to commit a crime, that he videotaped it since he had a phone with the ability to videotape or take photographs? Did he ever do that?
No, sir.
You were asked about this item that was found behind some bushes. Isn't it true that was part of an awning that Mr. Manalo had there?
As part of his house, yeah.
Right? There was
Awning,
no
yes,
evidence to
sir.
indicate that was used as a tool or a slim jam or anything like that.
None whatsoever.
And you would agree that an expert, or if he's qualified as an expert, a medical examiner or assistant medical examiner would be better qualified as to the findings that he made versus you saying what he said?
Yes, sir.
You would defer to a medical examiner, would you not?
Absolutely.
Mr. Romero asked you some questions about the burglaries that were being committed out there at Retreat Twin Lakes that you investigated or determined there was some, right?
Yes, sir.
And that the defendant had made calls about them, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I think Mr. Romero referred to it as a black male, right? At least one of them he referred to. Did you know whether the other individuals he had called on were black males or not?
From what I recall researching, yes.
Say it again.
From what I recall researching then, yes, they were.
Mr. Romero asked you a bunch of questions about the word, pardon my language, asshole. And did I understand you correctly to say that that is a derogatory term in describing somebody or referring to somebody?
In my opinion, yes.
And Mr. Romero asked you about the words or that the defendant uttered on on February 26th at around 7:10 before he followed the victim. Do you recall him specifically under his breath saying, pardon my language, these fucking punks? Do you recall that's the way he uttered it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, do you read any comics?
Never what?
Do you read any comics?
Comics.
Comics? No?
No, I
You know how
don't.
they have a little caption where they have like a little bubble because they kind of, what the person's thinking?
Yes, sir.
Okay. At the time he got out of the car and was getting out of the car, defendant said the words, these fucking punks, pardon my language, right?
Yes, sir.
And then he followed Trayvon Martin, correct?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Romero asked you a few questions about suffocating. Do you recall being asked questions about that, suffocating?
Yes, sir.
Now, the defendant claims that the victim was suffocating him, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did you find any evidence of blood on the victim's hands?
None that I'm aware of. No, sir.
And there was evidence that the defendant was bleeding, especially on his mouth, right here on his mustache. He had some, right under his nose, he had some blood, correct?
Yes, sir.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor? I'm not going to hit you, but
You can hit me. It's
up if I can. And I'm hitting you, correct? That's what the defendant's claiming, that I'm suffocating you and I'm not going to put my hand in your mouth.
That's fine.
Would you have your hands like that, just like this? Or would you be fighting me?
I'd be fighting you. I would fighting you. Make sure you got that.
Did you find any blood or anything on the defendant's hands?
No, sir.
You were also asked about the witnesses and stuff, and finding a personal witness again. State Exhibit 140, Mr. O'Mara showed you this. You recall this? And he asked you in terms of assuming, and I apologize, he may have actually shown you 139. I apologize. Let me take both up so that. 139, he asked you about assuming the defendant's story is correct in terms of where the altercation had, etc.
Yes, sir.
Did you have some evidence that possibly there was something going on behind these houses here, the Bahadur's house?
Yes, sir.
You were asked about the hoodie at the 7-Eleven. I'm not aware of, but what law states that an individual can't go into a 7-Eleven with a hoodie? Is there some law that I missed?
No, sir.
I haven't voted on it. And finally, you did not have the phone records in terms of Trayvon Martin or Rachel Gentile's, right, the lady you did not know he was talking to determine whether it was accurate based on when the defendant's phone finished or not.
No, sir, I did
In
not.
other words, you didn't have the defendant's phone records either, did you?
No, sir.
And I'm talking about in the February 29th interview. I apologize.
I was assuming that, yes.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. You know, we've been here almost 2 hours this morning on cross, redirect, recross, re-redirect, and now you're seeking to re-recross. I will give you 5 minutes. It's the state's witness, and the state will then have another 5 minutes on redirect.
Sorry, Your Honor, there's just new areas gone into it, I have to address them.
Well, you have 5 minutes
I will take it.
for your
Hopefully less.
recross.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, as far as any blood on Mr. Zimmerman's hands, of course, when he got to you, he was already cleaned up by EMTs and he had washed himself at SPD, correct?
Yes, sir.
You wouldn't expect to find blood on his hands at that point, would you?
No, sir.
And when the suggestion is, why didn't Trayvon Martin have blood on his hands, is blood susceptible to gravity as well? Like
Yes, sir, it
other
is.
things? So if he gets smashed in the nose and is thrown on the ground, which way is the blood going?
Towards the ground and
And back down his throat?
back down his throat or...
Right? And only when he stands up is it going to start coming out of his nostrils?
Yes, sir.
Which is after he's no longer being mounted by Trayvon Martin?
Typically, yes, sir.
Okay, so break my nose, put me on the ground, my blood's going backwards into my throat, right?
Theoretically, yes.
And would not be available to be on Trayvon Martin's hands at that point because there was no blood outside the nose, correct?
Correct.
And I'm not going to approach you like he did, but basically, first of all, let's use the left, if he's holding him down, could that be literally momentary, that he's holding him down and that Mrs. Zimmerman is trying to get back up?
Yes, sir.
And could the attempt to suffocate literally be momentary as well?
Yes, sir.
Could it even be a sleeve or an arm or a palm or anything that could have given Mr. Zimmerman that impression?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. You have,
I think I'm only going to ask 2 or 3 questions.
thank you.
I may only ask one. Right now, it could be raining outside, right?
Yes, sir.
And that would be pure speculation on your part, would it not?
Yes, it would.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Officer Serino, you're excused from the courtroom, but you're subject to being recalled. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we'll take a 15-minute recess. If you'll please put your notepads face down on the chairs and follow the deputy back into the jury room.
As they walk out, you didn't release him from the... Sorry.
Please be seated, and I did tell him it was subject to being recalled. Is there anything we need to take up before we recess for 15 minutes?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
I have a motion I'm filing at this point, Your Honor. It certainly doesn't need to be addressed right this minute.
Okay.
But it's in response to a motion the state filed yesterday. I don't know if they've noticed it for hearing or not.
I haven't received any notices for hearing, but we'll go ahead and take your motion.
Thank you.
We'll be in recess.